my wife came back from a business trip with a bigger belly. She went on this business trip for a whole month, standing at the airport's pickup gate. I watched her slightly hobbling pace, and a twinge of something strange fluttered through me.in. The video the other day, she said she had a cold, and now it seems that not only is she not better, but she looks worse. Hubby.She jumped into my arms, her movements skillful and natural. I could smell the faint scent of her perfume, the one I had given her for our 4th wedding anniversary. It was her favorite. She always said the scent reminded her of me. You're exhausted, aren't you? I took her bags. She was only carrying a duffel bag today. The usual silver trolley case was gone. The checked bags will be a while. She leaned on my shoulder and missed you. I stroked her hair. Come on, go home. While waiting to check her bags, she said she wanted to go to the restroom. I noticed that she walked with a little stiffness in her back, as if she was restraining something. She came back looking worse. Uncomfortable? Probably a little bloated from the long airplane ride. She pulled a smile at me. Let's go home. For the rest of the way, she leaned back in the passenger seat and closed her eyes to fake sleep. I glanced at her occasionally and noticed that her hand had been unconsciously touching the small of her back. That horrible thought flashed through my mind for the first time. When she got home, she said she wanted to take a shower. I went to the kitchen to prepare dinner, listening to the water in the bathroom and thinking about that thought I just had. It won't. I told myself. Luna won't betray me. We've known each other for 10 years and been married for 5. In those 5 years, I've gone from being a programmer at a small company to my current position as a technical director. She was also promoted from personnel specialist to head of personnel. We're all struggling, all of us. Bought this big 200-square-foot bungalow last year to have a baby. But she always said to wait, saying that her job is on the upswing right now. And I let her. After all, we're still young. The sound of water stopped. It was a long time before she came out, in her nightgown, her hair still dripping. Why don't you blow dry? You'll catch a cold. I grabbed a towel and rubbed her hair. It smells so good. She peers into the kitchen. You made soup? Stewed ribs. Her eyes were instantly moist. You're so good to me. I laughed and scratched her nose. Go change into something thicker. You should catch a cold later. She was quiet during the meal, sipping her soup one bite at a time. I asked her about her business trip. She simply said a few words, said the general manager led the team to talk about a big project. The specifics still have to be confidential. Mr. Fong has been using you a lot lately. Her hand paused for a moment. It's okay, probably because she sees me as more capable. I nodded without saying anything. Victor is the general manager who was parachuted in half a year ago and brought in a couple of big projects that brought the company back from the dead. In the past 6 months, he did reuse Luna and took her on business trips whenever he moved. I understand that too. Luna is really confident and pretty, and it's easiest to impress clients when negotiating. I looked at her slightly haggard side face and suddenly said, why don't you stop being so tired? Let's have a child. She dropped her chopsticks on the table. What's wrong? I pretended not to notice her abnormality. No, nothing. She bent down to pick up the chopsticks, just a little tired, and her hands slipped. That night she said she was too tired and went to bed early. I was working late into the wee hours of the morning in my study when I heard the sound of suppressed vomiting coming from the master bedroom. I pushed the door open and saw her holding onto the toilet and dry heaving. Eaten bad? I knelt down to pat her back. She shook her head. It might have been the water, and she had eaten a lot of exotic things on this trip. I handed her mouthwash. When she finished rinsing her mouth, I asked, going to the hospital? No need, just get some sleep. She smiled at me. You go to sleep too? Don't you have to work tomorrow? I carried her back to bed. She was fast asleep, breathing long and hard. I sat in the darkness for a long time, watching her sleeping face. The moonlight spilled over her face through the cracks in the curtains, making her look so quiet and wonderful. But in my heart, I was getting restless. The next morning, she went to work. I pretended to still be asleep, and when she left, I rummaged through her suitcase. The clothes inside were neatly folded, as was her usual habit. I checked over one piece at a time and found a makeup bag at the bottom. It's familiar. I gave it to her last Christmas. I opened my makeup bag, which contained several small pill bottles. I took it out and carefully identified it as an antiemetic and vitamins. That horrible thought in his mind was becoming clearer and clearer. I opened my cell phone and found the number of a private investigator. I happened to save this the other day and didn't really want to use it at the time. Hello, I need to investigate someone. Yes, sir. What is the investigation about? I took a deep breath. I needed to know her whereabouts for the last month. Especially who she's been with. Hanging up the phone, I sat on the edge of my bed and stared at the sunlight that filled the room. We picked out all the furniture here together. That big European-style closet was the one she chose and said she wanted to put a lot of pretty dresses in it. The coffee table was my choice, dark solid wood, heavy and airy. Now it all seems like a carefully laid gentle trap. I shook my head and told myself not to get carried away. Maybe it really is just me overthinking things. But that night, she threw up again. How about going to the hospital? I said. No need, I have an appointment for a physical tomorrow. She leaned wearily into my arms. Have you gained weight lately? My hand ran over the small of her back, where there was indeed a slight bulge. In the 5 years we were married, she stayed slim and never weighed more than 110 pounds. It's good to be fat. I purposely said, I like it when you're fatter. She was silent for a while. Husband, if I'm really fat and unattractive, will you still love me? Fool. I kissed her forehead. I love you for who you are, not what you look like. She suddenly turned around and hugged me tightly, burying her face in my chest. I felt a little wetness on my chest. Why are you crying? I patted her back. Too touched. Her voice is muffled. You really are too good for me. How I wished in that moment that my suspicions were redundant. But the next day, the private investigator sent the first report of the investigation. The photos show Luna and Victor walking into an upscale restaurant together. It was during a business trip, and they behaved intimately, like a couple in love. What's worse are the hospital photos. They went to the OB/GYN together. I stared dead at Luna's happy smile in the photo, my fingers white from overexertion. Turns out, she really did betray me. I later found out that she didn't even go to the medical checkup that day. She's just working late at the office. She came back late in the evening, saying that Mr. Fong had to change the program temporarily and asked her to help. I couldn't say a word as I looked at her tired face. I'm going to take a shower, she said. When she went into the bathroom, I picked up her bag and rummaged through it. Find a lab sheet on the innermost level. It's a pregnancy test. Positive. It's been 2 months. I sat crumpled on the couch, looking at the thin piece of paper as if I were looking at a judgment. 2 months ago. That's exactly when she first traveled with Victor on business. The sound of water stopped. I put the labs back and sat down on the couch to check my phone as if nothing had happened. She rubbed her hair and came out. Not sleeping yet? Well, wait a little longer. I say, have you been too tired lately? You don't look so good. It's okay. She sat down next to me and just hasn't had a good appetite lately. I put my arm around her shoulder. Do you want to take a few days off from work? No need. She rubbed herself into my arms. I'm so relieved to have you around. I looked at her serene sideways face and suddenly wanted to ask her, why? What did I not do well enough? Or did you never really love me from the beginning? But I didn't say anything. The next day was the weekend. I woke up early in the morning to find her out the door. A note was left on the table saying that Mr. Fong had called her to a meeting temporarily. I opened my cell phone and sent a message to the private investigator. Keep watching. I want to know their every move today. For lunch, they went to a private restaurant. Went to the hospital in the afternoon, an upscale private hospital. Went back to the hotel in the evening. The photo shows Victor entering the elevator with his arm around her waist. She was wearing a light pink dress that I got her for her birthday last year. I zoomed in and out of the photo, trying to see a hint of reluctance in her face. But she smiled so sweetly, like a little girl who had finally met her lover. She came back a little after 9 o'clock in the evening. "You're exhausted today, aren't you?" I handed her a glass of warm water. She took a sip of water. "Mr. Fong has been under a lot of pressure lately. Projects are piling up. He's been really heavy-handed with you," I said. Her hand paused. "It's okay. Probably seeing as I'm more capable." Exactly the same answer as a month ago. I suddenly wanted to tell her, "Actually, I know all about it. Knowing about you and Victor, knowing about your pregnancy, knowing all the lies you tell me every day." But I still didn't say anything. I'm going to wait. Wait for her to tell the truth herself. Or when I find more evidence. The following week I went to work as usual. It's time for dinner and meetings. It's just that every day I get a photo from a private investigator. They see each other almost every day. Sometimes in a restaurant, sometimes in a hotel. Victor always had his arm around her waist like he was showing off something. And she ever smiling so sweetly. Friday night we went to a friend's party. She wore a loose skirt that seemed to cover up well. But I knew that her belly was already showing a little. Halfway through the drink, someone started joking, "Luna, have you gained weight recently? Shouldn't you be having one?" Her face went white for a moment. "No, lately it's her appetite that's better." That's it. I laughed and made a good point. "My wife is so pretty. What's wrong with being fat?" Everyone was laughing and joking again. I poured her a glass of juice. "Drink this, don't drink." She gave me a grateful look. She was silent all the way home. When we got home, she suddenly said, "Honey, you're right. Let's have a baby." My heart pumped hard. How did I suddenly figure it out? It just feels like it was time. She kept her head down, and, "Well, I want to give you a baby, too." I looked at her slightly bulging belly and suddenly wanted to tell her, "You've had it. Just not mine." But I still smiled and said, "Good, but there's no rush. You get your body well first." She jumped into my arms. "Honey, I really love you." I stroked her hair and my heart went cold. I lost sleep that night. At 3 a.m., I heard her go to the bathroom and throw up again. I lay in bed, listening to her dry heaving, my heart feeling like it was being plucked out by a knife. When she came back, she saw that I was awake. "Did I wake you?" "It's okay," I said. "Would you like some warm water?" She shook her head and got under the covers. "Hold me." I hugged her from behind. Her body was warm, like every night before. But at the moment, I just feel strange. "Hubby, you say? Would you forgive me if I did something wrong to you?" Her voice was soft in the darkness, like she was testing. "Why are you asking this all of a sudden?" I forced my voice to remain calm. Suddenly it comes to mind. I was silent for a while. It depends on what it is. If it's just a general fault, of course I'll forgive you. But if it's a matter of principle. Her body visibly stiffened. "Like what?" "Like betrayal." I said, "Something like that I would never forgive." She didn't say anything, just scrunched her body into a ball. After a long time, I heard her sob very softly. I closed my eyes and pretended I didn't hear anything. The next day was Saturday, and she said she had to go to the office to work overtime. I knew she was going to see Victor again, but I said gently, "Take care on the road." After she left, I turned on my computer and pulled up all the photos and videos the private investigator had sent in the meantime. One of the segments is a sneak peek in a coffee shop. Victor sat across from her with a smug look. "Don't worry, I'll be responsible for the child. When you get divorced, I'll marry you." "But he's been so good to me." She kept her head down. "You think he's good to you?" Victor sneered. "He's just treating you like a pretty vase." Look at him. All these years, he just focuses on his own work. Has he ever thought about your future? It wasn't me who took you out to see the world and gave you a chance. She didn't say anything, just stirred her coffee cup. Besides, Victor lowered his voice. You're pregnant with my child. Do you want to stay with him and be a liar? Don't hesitate. Victor reaches out and caresses her face. You know my terms. As long as you divorce him, I'll marry you right away. By then, I'll make you vice president and you'll be the mistress of the company. I turned off the video and lit a cigarette. In the smoke, I suddenly smiled. Turns out that in her mind, I'm just a dumbass who only works. All those years of tenderness and consideration seemed to her to be raising a vase. Also, after all, she was a senior in the HR department. How could she be willing to be a wife to a tech geek? I opened my cell phone and transferred a sum of money to the private investigator. Keep checking. I want to know all their details. Especially Victor. When Luna came home in the afternoon, I was in the kitchen making soup. It smells so good. She hugged me from behind. Honey, you're so nice. I turned and kissed her. Tired? Go sit on the couch for a while. It'll only take a moment. She rubbed her face against mine. Hubby, when I have a baby, you're going to spoil me like that too, okay? My hand paused. Of course. She threw up again after eating. I helped her back to the bed to lie down and she took my hand. Honey, I'm sorry. What a silly thing to say. I gave her a kiss on the forehead. Get some rest. When she fell asleep, I gingerly headed out the door. Drove to the office and pulled up the security footage for the past 6 months. Frame by frame, starting with the first time she's alone with Victor. See how he approaches her step by step, and how he creates ambiguity with every opportunity. And how she, in turn, went from initial rejection to lust and finally falling. Turns out everything happened out of my sight. She fell into someone else's tender trap long before I thought she was working hard. Early the next morning, a message from the private investigator arrives. Some information about Victor has been found. I clicked on the file, and the more I looked at it, the more alarmed I became. It turns out that this seemingly successful general manager has had 2 marriages. Each segment uses the same tactics, first approaching a married woman on the grounds of her job, then seducing her with sweet words and career prospects. When the other person gets pregnant, they force them to divorce. And in the end, the first committed suicide after a miscarriage. The second one disappeared with the kids and was never heard from again. I lit a cigarette and looked out the window at the sun. Turns out it was all a setup and Luna just willingly walked right into it. Just then, the cell phone rang. It's a message from Luna. Honey, let's talk. I replied, good. She asked me to meet her at a cafe. She was already there waiting when she arrived, beautiful as always in her lavender dress. Want to say something? I'm sitting down. She bowed her head and twisted her fingers together. Husband, I have something to tell you. You say? I'm pregnant. My hand shook slightly. How long has it been? More than 2 months. Her voice is soft. Are you unhappy? I looked at her and suddenly wanted to ask, whose child is this? Don't you have any idea in your heart? But I still say gently, how can I be unhappy? Why didn't you tell me earlier? Her tears fell at once. I'm afraid you'll be upset. I've been so busy with work lately. Fool. I reached down and wiped away her tears. This was our baby. How could I not be happy? She jumped into my arms and bawled, Husband, I'm sorry. I'm sorry. I held her and felt her shiver. How ironic, she's apologizing to me for someone else's child. Okay, don't cry. I said, it's not good for the baby. She lifted her crying red face. Husband, are you really not angry? What's there to be angry about? I smiled and said, but it's you. You've worked hard for a while. What do you want to eat tonight? I'll make it for you. She bit her lip. I want to eat the soup you made. Good. She leaned on my shoulder the whole way home. I knew she was peeking at my expression, speculating on whether I was really taking it so easily. When I got home, I went to work in the kitchen, and she just sat at the table and watched me. "Hubby," she suddenly said, "you really love me, don't you?" My chopping hand paused. "Of course. Otherwise you think I've been acting all these years?" She lowered her head again. "So you say, if. What would you do if this baby wasn't yours?" I turned and looked at her pale face. "Why do you ask?" It's just hypothetical. "I just suddenly thought of it," she explained in a panic. I put down the chopper and walked over to her. "Luna, is there something you want to say to me?" Her body visibly shook. "No. Nope." "Really?" "It really didn't." She forced a smile. "I'm just imagining things." I nodded. "That's fine. But since you asked, I'll tell you what I think." She looked at me nervously. "If this child really isn't mine, I'll kill him, word for word. And then make those who betrayed me pay the price they deserve." Her face instantly turned pale. "Just kidding." I smiled and touched her head. "Did I scare you?" "Don't worry, this child is clearly the fruit of our love. How could I be imagining things?" She forced a smile. It's just that I'm so overthinking it." I turned around to continue cooking, and with the angle of my back to her, I took out my cell phone and sent a message. "Ready?" There was a quick reply. "Everything is ready and waiting for your signal." I look at Luna's ghastly white face in the mirror and give an icy smile. Good show. This is just beginning. The following week I behaved more gently than before. Every day, I changed my mind and cooked for her, watched TV with her, and listened to her talk about her work. Instead, she grew restless, often waking up in the middle of the night and then secretly crying. I know she's afraid. Afraid of me finding out the truth, afraid of losing the life I have now. But she didn't know that I had investigated everything a long time ago. On Friday afternoon, she suddenly called me. "Hubby, I have to work late tonight, and I may not be back until late." I smiled and said, "Okay, be safe." Hanging up the phone, I turned on my computer. The email I just received a few hours ago indicated that Victor had booked a fancy restaurant with a presidential suite. Looks like he's planning a perfect date with Luna tonight. I opened my cell phone and sent a message to the private investigator. Take action. At 8 p.m., Luna's phone call came again. "Hubby, we may have to stay up all night tonight, so go to bed first." "Okay," I said. "Don't get too tired." Hanging up the phone, I drove to that hotel. Going up to the top floor through the back door, I saw Victor's car parked there. They came out of the restaurant a little after 9. Victor wrapped his arm around her waist and whispered something in her ear that made her laugh out loud. I stood in the shadows and watched them enter the elevator. Then took out his cell phone and sent a message. Start. 10 minutes later, sirens blared throughout the hotel. I stood by the window and watched police cars drive in one after another. Then there were loaded SWAT teams. Soon after, Victor was escorted out. He was still in his robe and had a panicked look on his face. Luna followed, draped in a towel and shivering. I picked up my cell phone and sent her a message. "Working late?" After a long time, she replied, "Sorry." I ignored her and turned away. Driving home, I saw her standing in the doorway, shivering. "Husband?" When she saw me, she fell to her knees at once. "I'm sorry, I was wrong." I squatted down and looked at her. "What was wrong?" I betrayed you." She cried so hard that she couldn't catch her breath, "But I really know it's wrong. Please forgive me, okay?" "Forgive you?" I sneer. "Do you think it's possible?" "I know it's wrong." She hugged my legs. "I really know it's wrong. It's all Victor. He's the one who lied to me. He said he was going to give me a future, said he was going to make me a vice president." "So you gave yourself to him?" "I'll say it word for word." "Because of a VP position?" "No." She shook her head. "I just got spooked for a second." "What about the kid?" I laughed. "A moment of haunting, too?" Her face was instantly white. You know all about it? Any idea when you found out?" I whispered. "I noticed from the first day you came back. The way you walk, your pregnancy sickness, the way you secretly rub your belly. You think I really didn't know anything? Then why are you still so nice to you? I laughed because I wanted to see how long you could pretend. See how hypocritical and shameless you really are. She shook even more. No, husband, I really love you. Love me? I pushed her away. You call that love? I took a stack of photos out of my bag and threw them in front of her. See for yourself. Is this what you call love? Photos are scattered all over the place. From the first time she had dinner alone with Victor, to their embrace and kiss, to today at the hotel. One by one, documenting her betrayal. Which of these photos shows that you love me? She fell to her knees, looking at the photos, and couldn't stop the tears from flowing. Sorry. I'm sorry. Don't say you're sorry. I sneer. You're not sorry at all. You're just sorry I found out. No. She crawled over and hugged my legs. I really know I'm wrong. I am willing to abort the child. Please give me another chance. I looked down at her. Do you know what Victor is? She froze. He has been married twice. I said that each time he used the same tactics. First, he approached married women on the pretext of work, and then he seduced them with sweet words and career prospects. When they get pregnant, they force them to divorce. Her face turned pale. Do you know what happened to those two women? I went on. The first committed suicide after a miscarriage. The second one disappeared with the baby and was never heard from again. No. No way. She shook her head. He said he loved me and said he would marry me. Of course he would say that. I sneered, just like he had said to those two women in the first place. She sat paralyzed. So he is now? I laughed. He's probably at the police station right now crying and begging for mercy. She looked at me in horror. You think the police are here today by chance? I said, tell you a secret. I have collected evidence of all his illegal behavior in the past 6 months. Bribery, money laundering, job misappropriation. Enough to keep him in there for 10 years. You knew? More than no. I crouched down and looked at her. I'm waiting for you to step into the trap. You think he's toying with you, but you're all my prey. She was trembling. What about me? What are you going to do to me? I pulled a document out of my pocket. Divorce papers. Sign it. No. She shook her head. I don't want a divorce. Hubby, please give me another chance. I'll do anything, please. Willing to do anything? I laughed. So tell me, how am I going to pay you back for all the kindness I've shown you over the years? How am I going to make up for the trust I've given you? She cried even more. I know it is wrong. I really know it is wrong. You can beat me and scold me. Please don't drive me away. You think I'm going to hate you and scold you? I stood up and looked at her condescendingly. That would be too cheap. I'll show you what the price of betrayal is. I turned on my cell phone and played a recording. It's a conversation between her and Victor in bed. That fool of a husband doesn't know anything yet. In the recording, she is smiling happily. When I transfer the shares of the company to your name, I will divorce him. Don't worry, I will make it up to you when the time comes. Victor's voice is full of smugness, but your husband is also stupid enough to not realize anything after all these years. That's not true. She sounds so flirty. She just writes code all day and doesn't even know her wife is cheating on her. The two men laughed together. The recording came to a screeching halt. The living room was dead silent. She fell to her knees as if all her strength had been drained from her. When was this recording made? A month ago. I said, right when you first went to that hotel. No, it's not true. She covered her face. That's not what I meant. That's not what you mean? I sneer. What do you mean then? Say it. She looked up, tears blurring her makeup. I was haunted then. I didn't really mean it. Enough. I roar. Every word you say is a lie. You don't know what sincerity is. I threw the divorce papers in front of her. Sign it. Otherwise, I'll send these recordings to everyone. Let them hear how you cheated on your husband behind his back and how you called him a fool behind his back. She's shaking. You can't do this. Why can't I? I looked at her condescendingly. Did you think about my feelings when you betrayed me? She shuddered and picked up her pen. That. What about the child? The child? I sneer. You mean the wild child? Do with it what you will. Anyway, it's not my child. She cried harder, but signed the agreement with one stroke. Very well. I'm putting away the agreement. Now, get the hell out of this house right now. Let me pack my things, will you? She looked at me pitifully. No need. I said, I threw away all your stuff. Just like you threw away my heart. She stood up and staggered toward the door. Stopped at the door, hubby. From now on, I'm not your husband. I said, you don't deserve to be called my husband either. Her shoulders shook for a moment, then she pushed the door open and walked out. I stood still, looking at the photos all over the floor. Suddenly I feel very, very tired. Took out his cell phone and sent a message to the lawyer. Divorce agreement received. Going to do the paperwork tomorrow morning. Putting my phone down, I slumped down on the couch and lit a cigarette. In the smoke, 5 years of memories flashed before my eyes like a movie. It turns out that even the deepest love can expire. The truest heart can deteriorate. The next day, we met in front of the Civil Affairs Bureau. She was wearing a white dress, plain, her eyes swollen from crying. Seeing me, she subconsciously took a step forward and stopped. Get in there, I said. She followed me like a child who had done something wrong. The divorce was finalized quickly. The moment she got the divorce papers, she cried again. Was there really no turning back? I looked at her. You choose your own path. You have to finish it yourself. But I really know it's wrong. She grabbed my hand and gave me a chance, okay? I'll do anything. I shrugged off her hand. No need. Your life from now on has nothing to do with me. Turning to leave, she chased after me again. What about the child? You really don't care? I stopped. You think I'm going to mind other people's kids? No. She bit her lip. Actually, I'm not sure whose baby it is. Maybe it's yours? I turned around and gave her a death glare. Are you insulting my intelligence now? She was startled by the look in my eyes and took a step back. I mean it. You see, the timing is right too. Enough. I sneered. You think I don't know that? When you slept with Victor, we hadn't had intercourse for 3 months. Every time, you said you were too tired, that you were trying to build up your strength. Turns out, it's to feed someone else's energy? Her face was instantly pale. So don't try to fool me with such cheap lies. I say word for word, that wild child has nothing to do with me. With that, I turned to leave. She shouted after her. Do you really not care about me at all anymore? I don't look back. You're worth less than a line of code. A month after the divorce, it was like she had evaporated. I buried myself in my work, writing code day in and day out, as if that would take my mind off the unpleasant memories. Until one day, the front desk called and said someone was looking for me. I walked down the hall and saw her standing there. Thinner than a month ago, with a pale face and large, dark circles under his eyes. Something wrong? I asked. Can we talk alone? Her voice was soft. I looked at my watch. 5 minutes. We went downstairs to the cafe. She ordered an Americano but didn't take a bite. Go ahead. What is it? She bit her lip. I want to ask about Victor. I laughed. You're just now coming to ask that? Did he really get caught? What, want to visit the prison? I laughed coldly. Don't dream of it. With his crimes, he'll never get out in this lifetime. Her tears fell at once. That all those promises he made me. What promise? I said sarcastically that I would marry you? That I'd make you vice president? And you still believe this crap? She bowed her head. I know it's wrong. You're not wrong. I said, you're stupid. Stupid enough to believe the sweet words of a married man. Stupid enough to sell your marriage for a nebulous future. She cried even more. I really know it's wrong. Now no one wants me and the company has fired me. Serves you right. I stood up and 5 minutes were up. Wait. She grabbed my hand. Please help me. I have nothing now. I can't even pay my rent. I shrugged off her hand. What makes you think I'll help you? Because we're married after all. Shut up. I said coldly. You're not qualified to say that. You don't deserve the word husband and wife. She slumped in her chair. That. What about the baby? A child? I scoffed. Did you keep the bastard? I couldn't bear to abort it. She touched her slightly bulging belly. It was innocent after all. Innocent? I sneer. A proof of betrayal, and you call it innocent? She cried harder. Do you really not care about this child at all anymore? I told you, it has nothing to do with me. I'll turn around and leave. Don't ever come back for me again. Wait. She chased her out, tears falling. I'm sorry. No need to say you're sorry. I said, you just gave me a chance to see what kind of person you are. With that, I turned and left, never looking back. I got an email. It's from the company's legal department. Said Victor confessed everything in the detention center, including how he approached Luna step by step and how he used her to transfer company assets. I read the email and suddenly laughed. It turns out that in the end, he was only using her as a pawn. And she, too, had finally tasted betrayal. A month later, I heard from her again. Said she was staying at the hospital and wanted to see me one last time. I didn't want to go, but for some reason, I drove to the hospital anyway. She was lying in a hospital bed, thinner than the last time we saw her. When she saw me come in, her eyes lit up. You're really here. Say something. I'm standing in the doorway. I had a miscarriage. Her voice was soft. She was hemorrhaging and almost didn't make it back. The doctor said, I may never be able to have children again. I was silent. You know what? She smiled bitterly. I finally realized that this is retribution. I hurt the person who loves me the most, so God is going to punish me. You called me here to talk about this? No. She took out an envelope from under her pillow. This is my savings. It's not much, just a couple $100,000. I want to. All back to you. No need. I said, I'm not short of money. Please take it. Her tears fell again. Consider it my final atonement. I looked at her pale face. Do you think this will redeem you? I know I can't, she said, but I really regret it. If I could do it all over again, I would cherish you. There are no ifs in this world. I'm turning to go. Wait. She struggles to get up. One last question. Do you hate me? I stopped at the door. No hate. Because you don't deserve my hate. Walking out of the hospital, I light a cigarette. The sky was overcast, like it was going to rain. A month later, she was discharged from the hospital. I heard she moved back to her hometown and I haven't heard from her since. After another 2 months, I received a registered letter. Inside was a suicide note. By the time you read this, I will no longer be alive. I know that I deserve this ending. I can never forgive myself for hurting the person who loves me most in this world. After reading the letter, I tore it up and threw it in the trash. Then turn on your computer and keep writing code. For some reason, there was no longer any wave in my mind. 3 months later, I received a message that Victor had committed suicide in the guardhouse. I looked at it and deleted the message. Turn off your cell phone and walk out onto the balcony. Neon flashed in the distance like a big funeral. This grudge betrayal is finally and completely over today. From now on, I'm going to start a new life. Taking a sip of my beer, I lay happily in bed. Right now, I just want to get a good night's sleep. Restore the essence that, in the meantime, has disappeared.